say if you drive deep enough into the Arkansas backroads, the GPS stops being a tool and starts being a liar. I was looking for a shortcut to Little Rock. What I found was Oakhaven, a town that doesn't exist on any map, but once you enter, it's the only world you'll ever know. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The lawns were manicured, the children played in the streets, and everyone waved at me with a wide, frozen smile. I stopped at a diner for directions. The waitress, Sarah, handed me a coffee. It was ice cold. I looked at the clock. It was stuck at 3:14 p.m. I checked my watch. 3:14 p.m. I waited 10 minutes. Still 3:14 p.m. I tried to leave, but every road led back to that same diner. That's when I noticed it. The sun was directly overhead, but there were no shadows. Not under the cars, not under the trees. The villagers were still smiling, but their eyes had changed. They looked at me with hunger. Not the hunger for food, but the hunger for a new addition to their town. I ran to the local cemetery, looking for a way out. I stumbled upon a fresh grave. The name on the headstone was mine. Dated, today. I looked up, and the entire town was standing at the cemetery gates. Hundreds of faces, still smiling but blocking my only exit. One of them stepped forward and handed me an old-fashioned uniform. "Welcome home, James. Your shift is about to start." That's when the sun finally dipped, but it didn't get dark. Oakhaven never sleeps, and neither do I. In Blackwood Valley, silence isn't a choice, it's survival. The locals have one rule. After the sun dips below the peaks, never answer a voice you hear coming from the woods, no matter how much it sounds like someone you love, because out there, something is learning how to be us, and it only needs you to speak one word to finish its final lesson. Mark was a skeptic. He moved there for the peace. On his third night, he heard it, a soft cry from the tree line. "Mark, help me, I'm hurt." It was his mother's voice, his mother who had passed away 3 years ago. His heart hammered against his ribs. The rational part of his brain said it was a trick, but the desperate part wanted to believe. He approached the window, the candlelight flickering against the cold glass. "Mom," he whispered, barely a breath. The moment the word left his lips, the forest went dead silent. The crickets stopped. The wind died. Mark saw something shift. It wasn't one thing, but several. He grabbed his flashlight and shone it into the dark. There weren't any monsters in the traditional sense. There were 10 men. All of them looked exactly like Mark. They stood perfectly still, wearing his clothes, with his face, but their eyes were just empty white holes. The one in the front opened its mouth and Mark's own voice came out. "Thanks for inviting us in." Mark heard his front door latch click open, not from the outside, but from the inside. That's when the figures in the woods stepped forward, their mouths now moving in silent laughter. In the vast, flat heart of Nebraska, there is a village that the world chose to forget. It's surrounded by cornfields that stretch so far, they seem to touch the edge of eternity. The locals here don't use plastic or straw scarecrows to protect their crops. They used tradition, a dark, ancient tradition that demands more than just wind to move. Elias, a traveling photographer, arrived during the peak of the harvest. He noticed something unsettling. Every 100 yards, a wooden cross stood tall among the stalks, draped in rotting suits and old dresses. The villagers told him these were to keep the hunger away. Elias laughed it off, thinking it was just small-town superstition. But that night, the laughter died in his throat. At 2 a.m., the wind stopped, but the corn kept rustling. Elias looked out his bedroom window and his blood turned to ice. The scarecrows were no longer at their posts. They were standing at the edge of the porch, their wooden arms creaking as they shifted. He realized then they weren't stuffed with straw. He could hear them breathing, a wet, rattling sound that filled the silent night. Panicked, Elias ran for his car, but the cornstalk seemed to grow taller with every step, twisting into a maze that had no exit. Every row he turned, another cross stood in his way, but the clothes weren't empty anymore. He saw pale, withered hands gripping the wood. The village elders weren't in their homes. They were in the fields, waiting for the new harvest to begin. The next morning, the village was silent. A new cross had been erected at the edge of the field. It wore a dusty denim jacket, and a camera still hung from its wooden neck. In Nebraska, the corn doesn't grow from water. It grows from the souls of those who lost their way. Gray's End was once a thriving fishing village on the rugged coast of Maine. In 1920, a mysterious storm hit the harbor, and by morning, every single resident had vanished. No bodies were ever found. Today, the village sits in silence, crumbling into the salt air. Most people stay away, but for those who listen closely, the ocean still has a story to tell. Every Sunday at exactly noon, the old church bell rings. Its heavy metallic toll echoes across the water. But the church is a hollow shell, and the bell ropes have long since rotted away. A team of urban explorers decided to solve the mystery. They launched a high-tech diving drone into the freezing dark depths of the Atlantic, right beneath the old village pier. The drone descended into the murky blue. At 60 feet, the light faded. Then, the camera caught something impossible. Beneath the waves, the village of Gray's End was perfectly preserved. Houses, shops, and the church, all standing upright on the seabed. And the people, they were there too. Hundreds of them, standing in the middle of the underwater street, looking up at the surface with wide, unblinking eyes. Suddenly, the bell rang again, but the sound came from inside the water. On the monitor, every single figure moved at once. They didn't swim. They simply tilted their heads back, staring directly into the drone's lens. Their skin was blue. Their mouths were open in a silent scream, and they began to float upward, slowly, like bubbles, toward the boat on the surface. The explorers tried to pull the drone up, but the cable went taut. Something was holding on. As the first explorer reached for the rope, a cold, waterlogged hand gripped the railing of the boat. If you ever find yourself on the Maine coast and hear a bell in the fog, don't look at the water, because they are still waiting for someone to join the congregation.